Every night at exactly 1:23 a.m., I heard footsteps above my bed, but that floor was locked. Back in 2019, I stayed at a boarding school in Scotland for one term when I was 16. And something about that place never felt right. It wasn't by choice. My parents had to travel for work, and this was the only school that could take me in that late in the year. The place was old, not just in the way buildings usually are, but in a way that felt preserved, like nothing inside it had truly changed in decades. The floors creaked in certain spots, the radiators knocked at night, and the walls seemed to carry sound further than they should. My dorm was on the second floor. Above us was another level, but we were told it wasn't in use anymore. Storage, one of the staff said when I asked. I didn't think much of it at first. The first night was normal. A bit cold, a bit quiet. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind outside. Around 1 a.m., I heard footsteps. Slow, measured, right above my bed. I assumed it was just pipes or the building settling. Old places make noises like that all the time. But the footsteps didn't stop. They moved from one end of the ceiling to the other, then back again, like someone walking, pacing. I checked my phone. 1:17 a.m. I waited, expecting it to stop, but it went on for a few minutes before fading out. The next morning, I mentioned it casually during breakfast. One of the boys across from me just shrugged. "Yeah, that happens." I laughed a little, thinking he was joking. He didn't laugh back. Over the next few nights, I started noticing more. The footsteps always came around the same time, between 1 and 2 a.m. Sometimes it sounded like one person. Other times, lighter steps, like smaller feet. Once, I heard something else. A sound I couldn't explain at first. It was soft, almost like breathing, or quiet crying. I sat up in bed and listened carefully. It was faint, but it was there, coming from directly above me. I remember feeling uncomfortable more than afraid, like something wasn't right, but I couldn't prove it. The next day, I asked one of the older students about the top floor. He hesitated before answering. They used to keep younger students up there, he said, years ago. What happened? I asked. He just shook his head. They moved them. That was it. A few nights later, I couldn't sleep. It was colder than usual, and the wind was louder. I kept thinking about the sounds. At exactly 1:23 a.m., the footsteps started again. This time, I got out of bed. I don't really know why. I just wanted to understand what I was hearing. I stepped into the hallway. It was empty. The lights were dimmed, just enough to see where you were going. I looked up at the ceiling. The footsteps were clearer out there. Slow, steady, moving across the floor above. I followed the sound down the hallway, stopping directly under where it seemed loudest. Then I noticed something. At the end of the corridor, there was a staircase. I hadn't paid attention to it before. It led upward, to the floor we were told wasn't in use. There was a rope across it, not a proper barrier, just something tied loosely from one side to the other. I stood there for a moment, listening. The footsteps were directly above the staircase now. Then, they stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than the noise. I don't know what made me do it, but I stepped over the rope. The stairs creaked under my weight. The air felt colder as I went up. Not freezing, just still, like the air hadn't moved in a long time. At the top, there was a door. It wasn't locked. I pushed it open slowly. The room beyond was dark, but not completely. There was enough light from the hallway behind me to make out shapes. Old beds, lined up in rows. Sheets pulled over them, covered in dust. It looked like a dormitory that had been left behind. I took a few steps inside. That's when I heard it again. The crying. Clear this time. Not loud. Just close. I turned toward the sound. It seemed to be coming from the far corner of the room. I walked slowly, trying not to make noise. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. The dust on the floor was disturbed. Not everywhere, just in certain areas, like something had been moving through it, back and forth, pacing. I stopped walking. The crying stopped too. Just like that. The silence felt wrong. I stood there for a few seconds, listening, waiting for something else. Nothing happened, so I turned and left. The next morning, I went straight to one of the staff members. I told him everything. The footsteps, the crying, the room upstairs. He didn't interrupt me once. When I finished, he just nodded slowly. Then he said something I didn't expect. "You shouldn't go up there." "No, that's not possible." "Not you imagined it." Just that. That same day, the staircase was blocked properly. A wooden board was nailed across the entrance. No explanation. I stopped hearing the footsteps after that. No more crying. No more pacing. Everything went quiet. Too quiet. On my last day at the school, I was packing my things when I noticed something. My shoes were covered in a thin layer of dust. I hadn't worn them upstairs. At least, I didn't think I had stepped in anything like that. I brushed it off and didn't think much of it. Until I looked closer. There were small marks in the dust. Not random. They looked like footprints. But not mine. They were smaller. And they were facing the opposite direction. Like someone had been standing in front of me. Close. Watching. I never heard anything again after I left that school. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I still remember the sound of those footsteps, pacing, right above where I used to sleep.